ngā, te tūrama kairana, te tūrama erangi, te tūrama mō tana rongo rangi e tūne. Te puketana o te māhoretana o te hiringa kata mai te hiringa o ngā kau o tāmata. Ka wete wete a ka taratara ki te atua, ki te atahana, ki te ata kōrua, ki te ata wāna. Te huhu ki kairana, te huhu ki erangi, te huhu ki runa tangata matua. He o ka tau e he o ka tau e ko tūkoro mo te whai au ki tau mārama. E rongo o keihia ki runa ki a tēnā. Ui e tāki. Mā mei rana. Ka mihi atu ki a pūtau. Engari, ka tuatahi atu rā, ka mihi ki a ngai rātau kua pe turangitia ki te pō. Ki tērā, o tō tātou nei, au kuia rā, a whaia June Jackson, a tērā o ki kakunga. Ki titia ia e takoto ana. Ka tangi ana te nākau mōna. Ka tangi ana te maunga a tarana ki mōna. Nā reira nā, te koukuia mui mai rā, mui mai rā, mui mai rā. Te anora, tērā, pāpā, o Ngati Toa, Papa Sean, tētahi o ngā pau, o Ngati Raukawa, o Tukorehe, o ngai tātou katoa te Māori. Tā tēnei nā taku mihi atu kia ia, e tōna whānau e tangi haere mōna. Nā reira nā, pui noa tēnei taki wā, tai noa tūnā kia pūtau o Ngati Toa. Whakawhiti atu rā, ki te waipaunamu, nā mate katoa o tēnei wiki o tēnei marama, haere, ki atu rā te haweki nei o wiki o te pāmama. Āpitono tātai pono, te hunga mate kia rātau, āpitono tātai pono, hunga wiki te hunga o tēnei nā tuku mihi atu kia pūtau. Nau mai hara mai whakatau mai nei rā, tēnei kaupapa tino whakahirahira. Ki tēnei kaupapa e pāna ki etahi o ngā whenua o ngai tātou, o te aro. Ki tēnei ki wā o ngai tātou o Taranaki Whānui, o te anora o Ngati Toa, ka tukuna tūna mihi kia pūtau. Tēnā pūtau nau mai hara mai whakatau mai nā ki tēnei kaupapa o tātou e pāna ki tēnei whare puka, o pōneke, o te whanganui ātara, tētahi wāhi mā tauranga, tētahi wāhi mō tātou katoa ahako nohe, ahako āwai, ko wēnei wāhi he wāhi whakapiringa, he wāhi manāki, he wāhi he whakakotahi a tātou katoa. Nā reira, tēnā pūtau, tēnā tātou katoa. I just wanted to welcome you guys today. And before I welcome you guys, I also wanted to acknowledge there have been quite a few deaths within our family, within the iwi of this area. One who was Whaia June, who is quite a significant, was a significant leader here in Te Whanganui-a-Tara, who passed away last week. So I just wanted to pay homage to her, and also to Papa Sean, o Tukorehe, who was instrumental in a number of things in terms of the revitalisation of our reo and culture and tikanga and all those sorts of things. So two significant bastions of Māori culture and reo and tikanga passed away last week, so I just wanted to pay homage to them. And to you, I just wanted to say welcome. No mai hara mai ki te aro, no mai hara mai, welcome to this area of Taranaki Whānui, and also our relationships and our close bonds with Ngati Toa. We have a shared and mutual connection to this place and are intimately tied to this place. And we stand here as kaitiaki, as guardians, and just again, welcome once, twice, thrice. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
I'm not going to sing because I'm a terrible singer. And also, I had to run from the other side of town, so I'm sweating. Kia ora tai.
Kia ora, koutou. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Welcome everybody tonight. So we've got several distinguished guests here tonight, including our speakers, who we'll be introducing in a minute, but also our former councillor, Helen Ritchie, who was one of the people who started off with this design exercise. Professor Daniel Brown, who's going to be talking tonight, We've got Ken Davis, who's also was on one of the original team members of the team that we have here tonight, and Rebecca Kiddle, who's also going to be speaking. So we've got a number of people, and is that Janet Hill? Yes, Janet Hill, who I don't think we have the pleasure of speaking from you tonight. Or?
No, I'm just going to be a panelist.
Okay, all right. But also, welcome to you all. So we've got a lot of students here, and so this is the launch of a big event for an interesting event for the NZIA Wellington Branch, where we really want to take the opportunity while the library is currently in its present state of being uncertain about itself. And so we want to have the opportunity to talk about the library and to look at what some of its history has been, where it's come from, possibly where it's going to, why it's here, what it's doing. So we're going to have a number of people that are going to come up and talk to us. I think first of all, is it Jennie Smeaton and Rebecca Kiddle? Are you going to be talking first? Yeah, and Kara as well. Yep, Kara Puketapu. So do you want to start talking? If you want to come over here, there's the microphones pick up your voice.
We're quite loud.
You're quite loud.
Kia ora koutou, ko Jennie Smeaton taku ingoa, he uria hau Ngati Toa, Ngati Toa, Ngati Whenua. Kara, tōna motoa kareki, tēnei pō. Yeah, so we're here, I guess the three of us, to talk about some of the mahi that we've done, and I'll let everyone introduce themselves, but it's really about a sense of place from a Māori and a tangata whenua perspective, particularly in the city. So, say you go.
Kia ora koutou, nei rā ka mihi ki a koe te katoa, ko Piki Kiddle tōku ingoa, no ngā pohi me ngā tupai.
Good everyone, Puketapu-Dentice. Oh,
Is it too
feels enlightened right
Is it too bright?
I'm from here. I'm actually I'm a kid on the secret of the University of Wellington. Where I was born and raised. That's my wee connections into this place, Atiawa, and I think what we're going to do in terms of this this panel discussion is sort of start to consider and sort of impart some considerations around how you guys might go about thinking about this space within a cultural context. I think from a historical point of view, a lot of our spaces, a lot of our environments from a mana whenua perspective have been, I guess, taken over. Let's just call it as it is. And we have these buildings which represent a past that might not be as nice. I'm putting it softly. And so I guess as we move forward and recognizing that buildings are symbols, buildings and places, they last a long time. And not only that, they etch themselves within the psyche and the culture of our society. So I guess one of the key things for me is that how do we move forward within an urban landscape, within an urban environment, and start to decolonize these cities and landscapes, and recognize that there was a cultural history, there was a Māori history to this place, and then how do we integrate those values, that connection, that identity of the place into the things that we build. And then in doing that, how do we reimagine a new New Zealand that doesn't either intentionally or unintentionally hide the history, but actually embraces it and let that cultural element enrich what we've got and bring it to the front. So we're here today to sort of say that this is what you guys need to do as architects, as budding architects, and that as a part of your practice, engagement in working with mana whenua, with tangata whenua is crucial, is incredibly important. And so when you think about this project, this is why we're here today, because we think that you guys are amazing. You guys will start ringing us up and asking us for ideas and everything like that. So instead of doing that, well then maybe let's just create one forum where we can impart some knowledge and some wisdom and some thoughts for you guys to think about and consider as you go through this process. And so this is why we're here, to give you guys some ideas and thoughts about how you might go about decolonising the space and recreating a new New Zealand, a new history, a new rhetoric, a new discourse. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Becky, or Jennie. So enough.
So I guess a lot of the things that we wanted to talk about really in this space was that space of collaboration and co-design. I think a lot of the mahi that we've done over many years, particularly together and with Becky, has been in this decolonising space, and when we've had the opportunity to work together, particularly with local government agencies like council that have really brought us in to do this. It's not been an easy journey, and I think probably for maybe Kara and I, we've got the second part of the relationship, because we've come in after the RMA came into space and everyone's getting used to working in this Māori space. I guess for Kara, they had been settled, we were on a settlement journey as well. But having a Māori voice, I guess in any kind of urban setting is potentially can be a fight and a bit of a battle, and I think Kara kind of touched on that. But some of the opportunities that we have, particularly when you're creating spaces, and whether that be you're building new buildings like the Puketapu-Dentice, it really is a place where we can all contribute and reflect on who we are and what we have in a safe way. And Kara touched on we want to do this together, and we do. We have beautiful kōrero. You know, it's a beautiful history that's here. There's some that are blemished, and you know, like, and we brought some of that with us, and that's safe. And so
you guys put the guns.
We did. Just leave that there for a second. But it is very important. No, but it is important. And when we look at some of the names and the history here, they all predated us coming anyway. But when we're working together and when we reflect on the stories, you know, one of the good things that we've done recently together, and I think as an iwi it's brought Ngati Toa and Atiawa together, along with Ngati Toa, has been matatini, te matatini ki te ao. It was the first time we really had the chance to collaborate on something together, and we had to have this journey and we had to work with a lot of people, but it made us come together and really look at, you know, stories that bound us, and it was an opportunity to explore basically our relationship here and what we saw into the future, and that's how we came up with the name Te Matatini Ki Te Ao, because it's really about the future. A lot of the things that we tried to do was incorporating our rangatahi. So, you know, like a lot of you here today, it's this rangatahi voice that we look to and look for of seeing us forward into our next kind of space that we're at. We're moving out of a certain period, but there's so much to celebrate here. Like if you look at the haka kamati, for example, so created by Te Raukaha, pretty famous. When people go overseas, you know, like even if you're a Kiwi here, you might not do it, but when you know, go to the pub in London, like it's the first thing that everyone wants to say, and it's something that connects us. You know, it's the one thing of, you know, like celebrating Māoridom, and we all connect with it as New Zealanders, no matter, you know, what your background. You know, you might go away overseas and you might be given a bit of pounamu, and it means so much to you. So those are the things that we see in celebrating and working together and carrying those stories forward. No matter, everyone in a relationship has their ups and downs, but it's how we move and progress through. And the space that we're talking about today is a space that holds all those stories. You know, it holds them all, warts and all, you know, like anything coming through for a future. You know, the Civic Square place was called Te Ngako, you know, like it was the heart, the naming in that. You know, when you graduate, you're going to go and stand in that space. you know, these are all stories that no matter what your background, you're going to link to it. And what we're saying is, actually, when we're linking of that, think about from a tangata whenua point of view, or a Māori point of view, or you as a New Zealander point of view, all of these stories that give you a sense of place and a sense of opportunity to link in. Because that's really what we're trying to do, is to share our history and our stories with everybody, and so that you feel a part of it as well. This is the space that you live in. And it's quite, you know, it's quite exciting to be part of a journey and being in an area where you can create and challenge some of our amazing designs and concepts that we have and incorporate them into new things that we're seeing. But yeah, so that's my whakaaro on that. I'll pass it over to Becky, and she maybe can talk a little bit more about the mahi that she's been doing. Kia ora.
I just want to acknowledge I'm the outsider here. So these guys are mana whenua, so I'm speaking very much from an outsider's perspective. So I just want to acknowledge that. But just also to remind people that Te Atiawa or Ngati Toa didn't give up sovereignty. So if we kind of remember that in our history of New Zealand, I think that might kind of reframe the way we're thinking about space. So Māori didn't ever cede sovereignty. What does that mean for the way we design our cities? And I think it's a really nice starting point and a really kind of crucial starting point. If we take that further, what do we do about that, given the fact that unfortunately Māori have been left out of the picture, as these guys have said, for too long? We do need to be thinking about, well, what does decolonisation mean? And as Jennie said, we've been working together with Bianca and Amanda up here on a project called Imagining Decolonised Cities to try to work out what exactly does that mean for New Zealand's urban form. And we came up with I don't quite know how we came up with this definition, but we did. Maybe it was over a coffee or something. But essentially we thought that decolonisation was twofold. The first being, what is the identity of the people who belong to this place? And that doesn't mean that the rest of us don't belong here, but there are people that were first people here, and their identity has been completely erased from our landscapes. So what is their identity and how is that reflected in this place? And the second part of our definition was about justice. You know, how do, given the treaty suggested that this would be guaranteed to Māori and everyone else, how are we making sure that these spaces are offering spatial justice for Māori and everyone else? So when I think about the library in that kind of way, I think, okay, how might people be thinking about this as a space of justice? Because it's pretty clear to me that libraries are not just about books. And I imagine if there's any librarians in the room that they might elaborate on this. But there seems to be many examples in the way in which the existing library offered a whole range of different uses, forms, meanings, suggested that they understood that it was more than just about books. And so what is it, how could we move that further forward in terms of reclaiming a sense of justice for Māori and everyone else who might be disenfranchised? But if you look at the stats, unfortunately, Māori are particularly disenfranchised in our cities. So that's it. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Okay, thank you. And I think that sort of sets part of the tone for this evening quite well. So what I'm going to do next is ask for Ken Davis to come and speak. So Ken is an architect. He was a Wellingtonian. Is he still a Wellingtonian? He's an Aucklander now, really. Sort of.
You never know.
He's got a foot in both camps. And Ken was on the original design team at Field Architects just after he finished architecture school when I was there as well. So Ken and I go way back. Ken, you ready to go? Do you have anything that you want to put up on the
Yes, on that side.
Do we have that?
It's there.
That one?
Yeah.
come up in a sec.
Yeah, are we good to go?
All yours.
Kia ora, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to talk again about this project that's kind of slightly affected my life. But look, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge everyone who's come here today to listen, and some of my old colleagues who are here as well. But I really like how this evening's already been framed in terms of discussing what we do as architects in terms of a context, which is not just about building, it's not just about cities, it's about our society, it's about our history, some of it not very good, but that we need to confront. So I'm using a new bit of technology here. There we go. So what I want to do is I want to talk about creating and making the Wellington Public Library. But also, you need to understand that we started this project in 1987, and in terms of a bit of context, that was 9 years after the occupation of Bastion Point ended. Now, I don't know how many of you young folk out there know about Bastion Point, but you should. It was a really real watershed in our cultural history, and we'll touch on that in a second. It's bloody gone again. I've got to put my code in, it says. Yeah, I need a younger person. And also the other thing is that this project started only 2 years after the passing of the Homosexual Law Reform Bill. So we're talking about contemporary New Zealand 30 years ago, but it actually was only starting to be half progressive and confronting a lot of social issues. And as architects, we just don't build buildings. We're creating a framework within which we exist and operate as human beings. So it's really important that we have this conversation, and this development was created at a time in our history when we didn't look and consider things in the way we perhaps should have, but we tried to at the time. So I'll just go through this. And the other thing, don't let me forget in the panel discussion, I'll just say Berlin. I want us to talk about Berlin because it's quite important in terms of context and in terms of confronting historical issues and recent histories. Okay, what do I do? Okay, so the public library was done in 3 phases. The first phase was the Civic Centre design, where we looked at the overall concept for the whole space, and that was done between 1987 and 88. Subsequently, the council approved the first 2 stages, which included the Wellington Public Library, the base building, and the Civic Square space, including the Children's Museum, called Capital Discovery Place, and the underground car park, and I'll show you the plan shortly. And then the third phase was then the fit out of the actual public library. And I had the privilege of actually being across all of those 3 phases. So it was quite unusual to be involved in the concept and then ending up putting out laying out the furniture in the library as part of my job. So it was from a high level concept down to a small detail. We've got to acknowledge the team, and this is a photograph of us back then, and it comprised Asset Architects, Puketapu-Dentice, Modern, Stevenson Turner as the key design practices, led by Ath and Gordon Moller and Morris Tebbs from the respective practices, the engineers, and Fletcher Construction, who are the builders. And the key component as architects is always the client. You don't get great buildings without great clients. And Wellington City Council, and we've got, as Guy mentioned, former City Councillor and former Deputy Mayor Helene Ritchie and also Brian McKeon, he was the city librarian, put your hand up, Brian, and Jane Hill, who was his deputy at the time. So really important players in this. And of course, Roger Shand, who was the city architect, was a great champion of this project. So
Again, it's one of those people there, you.
it could be. Well, I'm the one who's wearing a tie. I'm wearing a tie. No, I'm not. But actually, what I would like to point out, there are a few interesting people here. That guy there, well, there's Morris Pipson, partner of Nan O'Sullivan. No? People know Nan? And then there's Af hiding behind the albatross, and that's me. But, and this guy here is a guy called Peter Steros. Now, Peter Steros is American. He came to New Zealand to play rugby. I think he was pretty hopeless at it, actually, as most Americans are. And he ended up getting a job at the School of Architecture, teaching something, yoga, I think. Because now he worked on the project for a couple of years and he went back to America and became an architect and yoga teacher. And he was invited and taught Michelle Obama at the White House how to do yoga. So there's a nice kind of connection. At least he didn't teach Donald Trump how to do it. So yeah, I'm in there as well. So it's just, I just want to acknowledge the team because they're really important. Of course, I'll touch on a few other people. This was our office in the old town hall, which is now the Elliott Concert Chamber. If anyone remembers that little theatre. And of course, I just want to point out to most of the architecture students, these things here. Anyone know what they are? They're called computers. So that's what we drew on. And this was the team, this was our Airfield architects team, and in here somewhere, there's Christina Mackay. Does everyone remember Christina Mackay, who may have taught you? She didn't work on the project, but she was there working on other projects. And there's Stuart Niven, there's Natasha Perkins. And there's Paul Walker, Professor of Architecture at Melbourne University now. There's Morris, Claire Athfield, and the whole team. Great bunch of people. And I have to say that we started this project in '87. Just as the share market crashed, and this project sustained the office for 3 years, 4 years really. And by the end of 1991, our 27 staff were 5. So it was pretty tough. So you as architects have always got to face these ups and downs in the economy. Anyway, getting into the design. The overall concept was all about retaining some key existing buildings. It wasn't about clearing the whole site, but it was, and the old library was acknowledged as important, the municipal office building, and the old town hall and the Michael Fowler Centre were kind of considered important to retain. Although there were no heritage requirements to keep them, it was quite interesting. The architectural team acknowledged the importance of those. A vacant site here and some old buildings here, and the kind of the start of a redevelopment of Wellington waterfront at that stage. So it was considered important to connect across there. And then obviously the opportunity of creating some meaningful public open space in between. So that was the kind of concept that drove it. These were some of the early concepts. There was always the library here in this kind of rigid rectilinear form, wrapping around here with the municipal office building. And then a commercial office building, because Fletcher's were going to pay $30 or so million for the theatre site here, that would help fund the civic centre for the city. This scheme here was building over Atiawa Quay. You'll see some shots of that in a second. And this is another version of the same. There are lots of different iterations and variations in the game building over here. There's a Waka house there as well. They were trying to incorporate that into the lagoon. And then there's a Gordon Muller's sketch from back in about 1988, and that was showing the building built over Atiawa Quay and a slow ramp up to a plaza over the water, over the road, and then to the water near St Gerard's Monastery there. This was thrown out by the city planner at the time. He said, "You can't do that, I'll resign if you do." His name was Ken Clark. You will remember that. You're probably at the meeting. But what happened when we were busy, this would have been about March, June 1988, I was in the office, that old town hall office, at 6 in the morning doing some filing, believe it or not. And suddenly the door burst open and there was Ath. And he just finished doing this drawing. And he said, have a look at this. And he rolled it out. It wasn't a big drawing, it was A2. And he'd been up since, 4 in the morning. He'd like to start work early. And he'd come up with a sketch plan. And really what it did was start looking at how you could create a linkage and an element to divide the space, separate the a plaza across the road. But the key thing here was we needed to get people in wheelchairs up 6 metres. So that makes a very big disabled ramp at 1 in 20. So this was kind of our sort of master stroke to kind of bisect the site and contain it, and then create this wavy wall that created this interesting relationship with the rectilinear form of the library and so forth. So this was a kind of a key drawing which I made sure Athfield saved, because I knew I might have to do a talk about it 30 years later. But this was Ath's original drawing. He's a fantastic drawer, and he loved colour, and he was irrepressible. Drawing was his therapy. But so this kind of formed the basic concept for what we ended up developing, and this is one of the earlier models of the scheme. You can see the colonnade wrapping around there. In that stage, it was going to be a monolithic colonnade made of Oamaru stone, and this is the office building that was proposed that Fletchers were going to build to help fund the development of the library here, the portal crashing into the CAB, the Civic Administration Building, and that whole ramp was supposed to carry through and past the through in between the Old Town Hall and the Michael Fowler Centre. We ended up drawing up cables with stainless steel rats. Ath really hated this building because it was designed by Miles Warren, and he really loved Miles, but there was always this kind of antipathy towards the work of a Christchurch architect coming and imposing maybe this was their 6th ship that was sent into Wellington to colonise Wellington from Christchurch, I'm not sure. But and then this is a perspective drawing by Instantial, who's in the crowd here. Put up your hand. One of the finest architectural perspective drawers in New Zealand, and part of the architectural team. And so you can see the colonnade going through there, the office building, and with these cranes. Now that's another story, I won't bore you with that, but Ath rang up Stan and said, look, we want some cranes on the top of the building. So he drew those sorts of cranes, the birds, and Ath said, no, I mean the cranes that are on the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank building by Foster. And anyway, so we ended up having both. But you'll notice down here is a little grove of Nikau palms. We'll get to that in a second. So this was the final presentation drawing we did. You can see the ramp going through there, the colonnade, the square, the office building, and that's a beautiful watercolour. We drew it up, Ath did all the watercolour washes, and then there's a kind of figure ground showing the building footprints and then all the open space in between them. And by this stage, Riri Thompson had been brought in to help design the bridge with John Gray and a group from the waterfront development. And this was when, and underneath here was the Children's Museum. It was all, because of the ramp, you're always going to get this subterranean space. Of course, underneath all of this is a car park and a place for all the big trucks to come and deliver and do the live broadcasts from the town hall and the Michael Fowler Centre. So there was a space that was kind of left over that was turned into an experiential science museum. And Riri had this idea of this as a fishing line, and the mountain was the anchor. Now, that's what Fletcher said, and we went away for 10 days when we got the project, and we seriously did. The whole office went to Fiji for 10 days, and no one was left to answer the phone. and I'd imagine teachers were quite furious at the time, but I only found out that a few years ago that we had snuck off without telling anyone. I know we'd snuck off, but Ath said, look, we're going to be busy for the next 3 years, have a good rest before you work very, very hard. So we did, we had a great time. So in terms of the library design, one of the key issues around the specific design of the library was it needed to be informed by the Civic Centre master plan, so you couldn't understand the library without its context in terms of the city and in terms of its relationship to the civic square and those forms. It was important that the library was a flexible design. It had future-proof qualities built into it. The typology was essentially of a commercial office building, so that you could just a simple column and beam construction, so that there was a lot of flexibility. You could bring different tenants in if you needed to. So, but it was that kind of approach, and it was a cost-effective way of building a large building. But there were some unique tenant requirements, obviously to allow for flexibility and future-proofing, but capacity for expansion. The expectation in those days was that, you know, the libraries kept growing and there'd be more and more books and so forth, although we were talking about things called compact discs and CD-ROMs. They're really important these days. The internet hadn't even been dreamt of. Or maybe it had, but not that we knew about. And obviously there was a requirement for a specific amount of space, so essentially 12,000 odd square metres of space, about 3,000 metres of floor plate, and about 2,500 metres of future growth. Some key floor loading requirements, because you've got a whole lot of massive books, and important to segregate public and staff circulation, issues of book security, because librarians are obsessed about looking after their books, well they used to be, as well as noise. And so the book place, and of course central to all this was actually designing a place for people. A key idea was about the idea of the library being a supermarket for books. So we had these large floor plates, regular columns, an asymmetric service core, important to have clear wayfinding that was spatially dynamic, and an aesthetic that was kind of semi-industrial. Come up some of the key drivers. So you can see the library in terms of the context of the buildings. This is a working drawing, a site plan showing the library in relationship to the other buildings. And then we're looking at the footprints here. So this is the basement, but you can see here the lifts set asymmetrically and the stairwells, some other stairwells in the corners, and then the book hoist there. But this is the car parking level, and that carried through underneath the civic square. And then the next floor up, this is the main entrance through here, and it was just one very large space with this big sinuous wavy wall, again exit stairs here and here and here and here, and the lifts and hoist. And then driving up through the middle of the building is a central atrium and escalator and stair block. And you can see this in the mezzanine. So every floor is kind of unique in terms of footprint. And this slices through the space. So it's a double height space, about 8 metres floor to ceiling here. This is the mezzanine where Clark's Cafe is here in the meeting room at that stage, that side there. The upper floor, you can see the large footprints. They needed large areas for their book collections. I think, was it 4 million books you had, Brian, originally? Something like that, Jane?
Yes,
3 million books. Those are the ones that had been returned. The fines weren't so bad in those days. And this is the upper floor, this is the second floor, and then the two top floors were these potentially expansion floors. Brian has another view on this, he might explain later, but the intention was this was for non-public space. It ended up being rented out for most of the building's duration to non-government organisations. This cross-section through the building, so you see the basement car park, the main entrance, the escalators and stairs driving up through this atrium. There's a return air plenum to the plant room, so that the air's returned and conditioned and recirculated, but you can see the main floor with the mezzanine there, the first floor, the second floor, and then there's two upper levels, and that's the plant room there. Oh bugger, did I do that right? Yeah, did I? Yeah. So there were a couple of aspects to the library design. The exterior was all about responding to context, about having contrasting faces, one to the street edges, one to the civic square, about articulating corners and enhancing wayfinding. And so these images here just show the kind of hard edges to the building and the start of the ramp on that side there, and then coming around to the eastern face with the wavy wall, we called it. A few images here, but you know, one of the ideas was it was soft, it was light, it was reflective, and it was transparent. So it was everything that the other walls faces to the building weren't. Of course, this face east side got lots of really nice soft light. And the other thing that was really, really impressive, actually, and I think a real design achievement of Ath's was really this wavy wall, because it just established this fantastic resolution between how do you build a building, you know, a couple of metres away from, you know, this really kind of very classical transitional modern library building, and this was just the most fantastic solution, created these wonderful spaces, and then the water provided levels of reflectivity. So just a few images of that over the years, and then defining really well defined entries, front and from the street and then the civic square. And then the library interior was really designed, as I mentioned before, was flexible and open. Clear wayfinding was critical, and that's why that central bank of escalators and stairs, but it needed to be spatially dynamic, and we wanted to achieve a range of interconnecting spaces and volumes, and of course the aesthetic was all around treating something that was kind of semi-industrial, and so we exposed services and building structure, and that gave us another metre or so of space to make the building seem more generous. And I think it was a desire to create a really generous public building, because this was for us. We weren't building an office building for some corporate high flyers who, you know, this was for the people of Wellington. So, and New Zealand really, I mean, you know, public buildings are for the public. And so we exposed the structure. Originally, the original design had a suspended ceiling all the way through here. And Ath said, oh look, let's ditch that. And was able to show that we could do all of this work at no additional cost. So the cost of the suspended ceiling was the same cost as making a bit of effort to do this. Now this suspended ceiling was drawn by hand by the now Professor of Architecture at Melbourne University. So that's Paul Walker did all this work. He lay on his back like Michelangelo looking up, drawing a ceiling, because everyone knows what a reflected ceiling plan is, don't you? Do you? Yeah? No? Okay, reflected ceiling plan is just a plan, but you're looking up.
They know.
Well, I'm not sure, Guy, these days.
They're very well educated.
Yeah, sure. Anyway, so there are a lot of exposed services. We designed lighting, and you can see cable trays that are serving floor boxes above and so forth. So lots of really interesting things. And this is just describes some of the interconnectivity of spaces. And you can see the return air went up through there, and that's the entrance into the New Zealand room there. I'll talk about that in a second. The Bilbao effect, well, the Nikau Palms, and I say Frank Gehry, well, there's an interesting story here, because when we were in the midst of drawing up this building, Ath and Riwi went off to LA and teamed up with Frank Gehry, who I assume you know. Do they know about Frank Gehry? Yeah, and they put an entry into the Museum of New Zealand competition here. And at the time, Gehry was working on the Bilbao Museum, Guggenheim Museum, and F came back, and we were busy drawing, not that, busy drawing this one up. But these are some of the design iterations we went through. So that's the front facade with a low colonnade and the entry portal there, and this is how the design changed over time. That's a drawing of that same model, and then we changed it to create this very large monumental entryway into the building, And we're busy drawing this up to get it ready for building consent to get built. And Ath turns back up from LA, having spent time with Frank Gehry and Riwi and looking at exotic landscapes and plants. And he's over in the corner drawing on our drawings. And he says, "Hey Ken, come over. Tell me what you think." And he laid some butter paper over this elevation. And where there are columns here, he started drawing some palm trees. And he said, "What do you think?" I said, "Oh, that lightens the facade up a bit, Ath. I think we should give it a go." So he did. And it saved the council $30,000 as it turned out. So they were cheaper. But he inadvertently created this kind of icon that I don't think anyone kind of expected at the time. But, and so that was the drawing we changed. And so here are the columns from that time. And you can see them built. And of course, there's a working drawing of a column of a Nikau palm. I don't know that anyone's ever seen a working drawing of a Nikau palm. But this is what God made. So what's interesting about it, we kept the monolithic bases, very postmodern all of this. The thing I have to say is that I hadn't looked seriously at this design for 20 years and I couldn't get over how dated it was. I thought, wow, this is so postmodern. But in a funny sort of way, it's almost worthy of, this period of architecture is, being decried and denigrated, but it'll have its time, and maybe it's starting to have its time now. But these were steel line pipe columns full of concrete to support the structure, but they were wrapped in copper, and then these are galvanised palm fronds made from we had an actual palm leaf, Nikau palm leaf in the office that kind of grew brown and crunchy over the time because no one watered it. And Graham Boucher was one of the directors. I remember him sitting at the dining room table cutting out a full-scale template of a Nikau palm leaf and cardboard, and that became the template. So all of these leaves are exactly the same in terms of mass production. They were just put there and just attached to these rods. And the base of this is clad in lead-coated copper, which is a material that a gear used a lot in America. So in terms of the interior, there was a lot of flexible layout, semi-industrial New Zealand arts and craft. We wanted to combine bespoke furniture. We wanted to incorporate New Zealand arts. And it was all about integrating the interior fit out with the base build. So at the time we got the building under construction, I got brought onto the team to lead the interior fit out of the building. And so that included dealing with partitions and carpet and bookshelves and a whole range of things, and working that into a program that allowed the building to be built relatively rapidly. These are some drawings that Ath did of the original fit out. You can see some of the layouts for shelving and so forth. But these are some of the things we designed. And now Natasha Perkins was a key player in our team in the interiors, and so she was involved in designing aspects of the carpet, the lighting, and redesigning the way the bookshelves landed on the ground, and the way we lit the space with diffuse lighting, and even the most popular of all objects we designed in the whole project, apparently, according to the librarians, was our book trolley. Now, what was fantastic about this book trolley was it was pretty much the same as every other book trolley, except all it had was a bumper with you kind of ubiquitous kind of postmodern curve on it. But the other fantastic thing that Natasha found, was a stuff called closed cell foam. And the beautiful thing about it was, because the librarians hate noise, sorry about this, Jane and Brian, but it is a thing. And they stack the books up on this, and when they fall over, they normally land on a flat piece of timber, they go bang, bang, bang. Well, this just didn't make any sound, and they didn't slip. So this was just universally the most successful product we designed, and this was another product we designed. In fact, this is so successful, this is a book stand for the bookshelf, so Natasha was involved in designing this beautiful little number. It's still in production, and 30 years later, it's the new versions of this, identical, are in the new Devonport Library that Ashfield Architects designed. So there's kind of a sort of continuity. We're also involved in commissioning artworks for furniture and other aspects, and all the main counters were designed with elements using swamp kauri. And Karen Wilson, a New Zealand designer, furniture designer, designed these chairs, bespoke chairs specifically for the library, called the Kura chair. And we also engaged artists like Fergus Collison to design murals, or to produce paint murals. He painted in a kind of naive style. Claire seemed to think that that was pretty good, suitable for kids. He was a deaf Newtown artist, and I remember showing my sister-in-law one of his paintings, which I'd inherited, and I said, "This is by Fergus Collison, he's deaf." And she looked at it and looked at me and said, "Yes, dumb and blind." She didn't like his work. I thought it was great. And here was some, part of the project was to get all the local schools, the kids to do murals, and this is the curtain in the children's area, and some bespoke seating stands, entry for the counter for the kids section of the library, some work by Jeff Thompson, and the clocks. We commissioned Duncan Sargent, who was a local designer and artist, to design these clocks for the different sections of the library, like the children's library section.
I think we need to wrap it up.
Yeah, nearly finished. And the New Zealand room, this was another interesting issue, because historically the New Zealand room had been its own separate room with its own precious books, and it was fiercely protected by the New Zealand Librarian, Jackie Baxter Sturm, J.K. Baxter's wife or widow, and but they needed to go into open plan space, so we came up with this idea of creating a gateway to define the entry to the space, and we found an existing sculpture by Paramatchit in Te Papa, and I think your sister found it, actually, didn't she?
Could be.
She did. And Fiffa. And so thanks, Fiffa, because I remember showing me this. And the other nice thing about this, when we put it in, Jackie said people are going to hit their heads on this, so she went out and got a whole lot of feathers and hung them from the bottom of this, and they're probably still there today to protect people as they went into the New Zealand room. Stuff-ups and opportunities.
I think we need to move on to the next.
No, that's right. This is important. Bear with me. So do you want me to finish? I can finish now. Or shall I carry on?
Get off.
Get off? Ouch, damn spot. So the other thing is, when this was first designed, Ath had 2 entries, both at ground level, and the librarian said, "You can't do that because we've got to control the book." So then he came back and said, "Oh, maybe we'll build a mezzanine up here, and so you could still enter the building through here, book security there, but you could walk up and through the library without going through book security." So there was only one point of control, and that was pretty important. I'm not sure that it's so critical these days. The other thing was this window seat here. I've called it the New Zealand's longest window seat. It's 90 metres long, but originally this was going to be about a metre high and that wide. I said to this, because this is contained all the fan coil units to provide warm air up to heat the space and reduce the heat loss. And I said to the engineer, "Can we put it on its side?" And he said, "Oh, okay." So that's how it happened. We've got a fantastic window seat that everyone loves sitting in. So that's how that happened. The other interesting story I need to touch on, because it relates to Judy Keith's child. We castellated these wind beams just to lighten visually. But apparently Judy's child, when she used to take your child, Judy Keith Brown, the President-elect of the New Zealand Institute of Architects, who's here today, her child climbed all the way up there. Now, we never anticipated that, I have to say, but she, boy or girl, didn't die, still alive. And there's another stuff up in behind this commissioned artwork is a steel beam. So we commissioned John Scott, who was an artist from Wanganui, to design this artwork, and he came up with this idea of making a piece of custom wood look like a steel beam that we were trying to hide. So that's John Scott's work there, and there's another shot of that here. But we had quite a decent art budget in the building. And the other interesting thing is that we use noise to mask silence. But one of the problems with libraries is, historically, they're always so silent that you feel intimidated. The great thing, I remember my mum saying when she first came to the library, she said, this doesn't feel like a library, and she was 70. And it was because it was noisy. There was all this white noise from air conditioning, that's quite good, from air conditioning and escalators. So just think about it when you're designing buildings, that it's all about providing an ambience that allows people the comfort to speak.
Okay.
No, this is still important. Sorry. So there were a few innovations, a few firsts. This is the first cafe in a public library in New Zealand, possibly Australasia. We used industrial materials. This is a mesh that's used for making kettle fries, chips, and this is a woven mesh that's used in stockyards for sheep. And this is another story where the book returns, seriously, the book returns was an issue because a lot of libraries around the world were burned down because people returned inflammable books or flammable books. And so we were required to, all the book return that goes into the basement is a fire cell. But also there are fluids often dropped into these book returns, often urine. So we designed this so that there's a spiral ramp that takes the books down to the bottom. At the start of the spiral ramp, it is perforated, there's a little tundish underneath it, and a pipe that delivers the urine back onto your feet. We didn't ever test it, actually, but I think it worked. And then in the bottom, with these, this is where the books go when they come down the chute, and when they're full, a little infrared beam activates them and they move around. And these were designed by process engineers who designed slaughterhouses. And also, we believe, the first bilingual signage in a public building, a European public building in New Zealand. And, well, I mean, what was interesting, and so the marinating, what's that? Oh, yeah, okay. And so I'm just looking through these.
So now you know when they do the Oscars, they bring the music up to encourage people.
That's right, fuck off.
That's right.
So come on back over here.
So, saving it, are we going to save it or are we going to scrap it? That's up to us. Thanks.
Thank you again.
Sorry I took so long.
Only 3 times longer than you went again, but it's got a lot bigger than the last time, which is, look, it's a really good talk, there's a lot. But we've still got a panel discussion up here later, and we still have to actually find out why you're all here tonight. But what I want to do first is to get Professor Daniel Brown to come up to talk about libraries. In particular, he's been doing a study with his students at the moment. And so we're looking at the land, we're looking at this particular library, we're also looking at what libraries have been, can be, and maybe, again, next drunk. That's pretty. Daniel, 15 minutes.
Okay. This is my standard 50-minute lecture, so if he can do it, I can do it. I'll be quick, but I wanted to show you lots of images just to get you excited. And when I was told that the focus of this talk would be on narrative and storytelling, the focus of the panel discussion, within the context of libraries, I just thought I would show you a lot of libraries that really do have stories to tell and that have told them really well. And I'll do it through the point of view of history. And this is a photograph I took inside the Wellington Central Library just before it closed down, where I was trying to tell its story to others. And so I took a single photograph of looking down from the top and just moving the camera up to the ceiling to show the incredible transformation of atmosphere and spatial narrative as we did move from the lower bit to the top. And I'll just show this to you. And the music is called Medieval Transformation because the library moves from the contemporary to the medieval. And this is just one photograph. And that photograph ends with the laptop I brought with me to crop together the 75 photographs I took in order to then make it one photograph. And the beautiful thing about that in my eyes was that it ended with the library looking out at the city gallery. And goodness, I love technology. All right. I'll start in 1851, and I'm going to do it's 10 minutes. I'm going to go through this. The most beautiful library that ever told a story was the Bibliothèque Saint-Geneviève in Paris, which treated the entire structure as a canopy of trees, with the whole metaphor that we are in the forest of knowledge when we visit this library. By the same architect, Le Proust, 10 years later, the Bibliothèque Nationale de France did the same thing with the metaphor of the forest of knowledge, but it did one more thing beyond that. The stacks inside, all of the floors in the stacks of this library were glass block, so the sunlight penetrated through every floor right down to the bottom, and all of the books were illuminated by the sun. The Beinecke Book Library at Yale, where I went to school, is incredible. It's a building within a building, and it treats the books as if they are in a sacred wakahuia, as if they're in a treasure box. And this is what it looks like inside. And there's no glass in any of the windows. The sunlight comes through ultra-thin slabs of marble to illuminate it, and we look at the bindings of the books as if they are rare treasures held suspended in the air. Louis Kahn did the Exeter Library, and his whole idea inside was that the books and knowledge would be framed so that as we walked around this atrium, bathed in sunlight, we're always looking from the knowledge where we stand to the knowledge we have not yet reached. Here in Osaka by Ando, this is a beautiful library that's actually a memorial rather than a library, and it's a memorial to a writer that holds 20,000 books in honor of him. And each of the books is accessed by a stairway that can slide back and forth so that we climb up the wall of books. The whole library memorial is defined by books. This one in Alexandria, Egypt, was based on a lighthouse of bringing light and knowledge into the building. And inside, the entire thing cascades down floor after floor so that we witness and perceive everything about library knowledge and the people who gather there. This one, by some architects I've never heard of, in Auckland, is really designed almost like a town plaza, where the buildings become participants in a greater dialogue, a spatial dialogue. And you can see from the plan that it almost could be a town square in how it's relating the buildings of the library to one another. This one in Singapore almost looks like the building itself is books coming out of the bookcases. And it's designed as if they are tree canopies, tree houses, where you go in search of knowledge. This one in Loyola is a digital library. It's a library to house no books. But in fact, it's about making us feel like we are connected back to nature and the environment rather than housed within a prison. And that's the upper level. This one in Mexico is designed to represent a great ship that navigates through time. And it looks like an industrialized, beautiful machine just hovering there in space. And each of these machine-like elements feel, once again, like they are parts of a mechanical furnishing system of pulling out and in again as the whole vibrancy of the storage of the books is told in that story. This library in Chicago is completely robotic, and all of the books are held in these beautiful silver vessels and simply accessed by the robots and then taken upstairs into a heaven where we are handed the book under the clouds and under the sun and under the sky. Here in Stuttgart, this is a cube within a cube, and when we enter inside, the whole thing is meant to be a paradise, a heaven, a white cube holding all the books of wisdom as the participants of the walls from which the cube is built. This is a mini library. This is almost a pop-up size library held within other buildings. This one is for children. Another one just like it is for adolescents. Another one just like it is for adults. And it's to give them a sense of adventure and discovery and let them wind and move themselves within these buildings. This one in Norway, the entire library is meant to also become the furniture and the furnishing. So it holds the books while it holds the people. You know, Guy's giving me that same look that he gave.
No?
Cool. This one, again, it's about bringing the warmth and community into the library. So the books are nestled into the walls, and we sit upon the walls within which they're nestled as participants. This one by OMA in Qatar, when we look at it, it's, again, this is one of my favorite designs, because this one really does tell an incredible story. And it's a sacred story. It's almost as if it's a religious environment. But to me, all of those stacks that we see in the distance are like guardians. They're like kumatoa, just standing there watching us, witnesses, sentinels. And what they're looking at is this beautiful deep depression in the foreground. And when we come forward to look at that deep depression, we realize that parts of the mezzanines just hover over at different angles. But ultimately, there are simply 5 books placed below as sacred artifacts. And one of these books is not even bound, but it's a book of oral treasures. This one, again, by some architects I've never heard of, but it's quite beautiful, this notion of, again, a building within a building, where the library hovers above the community, so that each one is nestled within the other. It's absolutely beautiful. And here you can see how it's lived in and used by the people, so that they participate. The interior is like a landscape upon which we perch. This one by Zaha Hadid. What's interesting is that each of the programmatic elements of the libraries are housed in each one of those 3 different forms that just spiral and revolve around one another. But all of the straight lines, when we enter internally, you can see they wrap around cores as if it's fluid motion of streams moving around pebbles. And when we get inside, the entire interior is ultra fluid, just about the motion and the act of discovery. This one in Bulgaria by Aida. One of the most interesting things about it is it allows for a permanent experience. So the whole thing wraps around, so we can just continue around the entire journey of the library, right down to the ground. And in fact, something I think is a little weird, but in fact, as this comes down, it becomes the car ramp and goes down 7 floors of parking. So it really knows no bounds of inside, outside, in between. And there it is. And what's nice about this, or interesting about it at least, is once again, all the books, there were so many books that they needed to hold, that all of them are contained within these bookshelves that you just turn the wheel and the bookshelves move forward and allow you access through the aisle to get to the book that you wish. This one at Cornell. The whole idea of this library is that libraries sometimes are too small, sometimes they're too big, and a library needs to be completely able to, what they say, breathe. So it's an expanding and a contracting library. And the stairs into it almost filter right through the shelves and come back out. This one, there's only 2 more. This one in China, again, quite beautiful. And this whole idea was water is symbolically, allegorically, the meaning of knowledge. And this whole town was born of water. And so the poets who wrote of the waters imbued water as the most important part of knowledge. And this is the inside, and it uses these highly reflective floors. So the world of the book, which beautifully folds down, is then reflected permanently and eternally down on the floor. And this is the Children's Center in that same library. And the last library I'll show you, again in China, is this one, where the entire facade, the entire aura, the entire atmosphere of this library is fundamentally defined by the book. And I did it in 10 minutes. Those are the slides. Just as one quick statement, you know, I am leading a course right now on redesigning that library, and quite a few of my students are taking a very beautiful and unapologetic Maori approach to it. And some of them are so spiritual and poetic and gorgeous. It would be lovely to have shown you those tonight. I would love to see them myself if they would finish designing them. But the notion, a lot of them are dealing with the first notion of the library being a wakahuia, that it is a treasure chest, and that we have to decide what it holds within it and how it expresses itself to the world outside. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. That was really good. You are a fantastic storyteller, and I can see why your students love you and appreciate the work that you put into your lectures. Okay, so we've reached the end of our scheduled speakers. What we're going to do is ask everybody if they are still here to come and have a panel discussion, which was going to go on a bit longer. I think it may need to be quite a shortish discussion. But yeah, it's always been hard to get Ken to keep to time. But that's okay. But yeah, so we've got all the people, all the specialists here, and so if they want to come up to the front and we can just have a little correro from you all. If I can turn the lights on, if we want to go to, shall we go to full? That sounds a bit off. I'm going to put front on. That's a bit better. So look, we've also got some of you are going to be disappearing, some of you need to get fed and things like that, but we haven't really talked about the purpose of tonight, or the fact that there is a competition for this, and I'm not sure who is going to, I'm going to talk about it? I'm the person who knows the least about that, but we'll try and feed this into the conversation, really. So I guess the question for me really is, we've got an existing building which is telling existing stories that has been apparent for the last 30 years. And our first three speakers were speaking very passionately about the unspoken stories that it still wasn't telling, that we've still got other stories that we need to weave into it. The issue we have, of course, is that we have an existing building which is doing one thing. We have the council that wants to possibly do other things, and so the opportunity is that we can actually take the story and make it a wider story, make it do more. I just wondered if anybody on the panel would like to talk to that in terms of how best to try and, for our people out here, to try and weave those additional stories in that may not be readily apparent at the moment.
I just had a thought. Just looking at Daniel's examples, which are some of them beautiful. I think if we think about the way that Māori conveyed knowledge, historically it wasn't by book. And so I think there's this whole other way of communicating knowledge, which we don't actually represent that well in our libraries currently. And so maybe thinking about oral histories and oral contemporary histories and contemporary ways of, there's sort of obvious things like audiobooks, but that idea kind of came to me about how you might convey some of those narratives, but also think about it within the kind of program of a library.
Yep. Okay. So Jane, as a librarian, how do you feel about the perhaps downgrading the importance of the book and upgrading the importance of the history within the book? How does that?
I can see that. Libraries have changed. That, to me, the building as it is now is a statement in time, and it worked. It does not work now for a library. A library, to me, has to be open, reflecting the people, the iwi, etc. It has quite different functions. It has the bulk, but not so dominant. I think if I look at the building now, it is very much book-driven with rows of books. But there are other experiences. Libraries now with the digital and the building as it is now does not cope with the current thing. If they wanted to put in new digital aspects to it, it's really hard. For example, you just put in RFID to make sure that people could issue their own books. It took ages of cabling and things to go through because of the way it's built. But the experience is far more interactive. I was interested with Ken talking about noise and librarians. It's not the generation now. It's active spaces. There are quieter ones, but they're active spaces. It's people getting together, which there aren't even small meeting rooms. There's some fairly physical things as well. But the experience has to be the combination of literacy and the written word, but particularly what people want. The library did, just before the Kaikoura earthquake, did a whole lot of design-led thinking with the public about what it wanted. A bit like Tūranga Library, which I hope many of you've seen in Christchurch, because that's where the libraries are going. In New Zealand, that's where the design is working in quite a different way. For example, the children's area in Tūranga is just full of Lego on one side, huge area, which people are building, and then they get to the books, and then they get to everything else, and it opens. They're creating their own stories within there, not just static thing. I mean, I can remember when I was managing the whole areas and things in libraries, the real fight to get money for libraries because they weren't seen as important. The turnaround worldwide has been the building of libraries. In Sydney, for example, who's had warehouses, small libraries, suddenly they're building 5 enormous libraries, and they are so different. They deal with the environment, they deal with the cultural issues, they deal in different ways. I'm off next week to an international World Library Conference, and part of that is the buildings that they have got, and there's a big award. And for the first time, New Zealand features, because of Tūranga, has got through to the final. There were 200 finalists, and they got through to the 4 in the final. And that, I think, will be an interesting question for people, because it's a different concept than something else.
So do we need to just change the word? Is the word library itself an outdated word that automatically implies something? Should we just not call it a library? Should we just wipe that word from our linguistics?
Librarians will say you can have it, and it can still mean different things.
Yeah.
But it's changing the concept of what it is. It's changing what that is.
Okay. Jennie, do you want to?
Oh, well, I mean, I was thinking it's more like a place for mātauranga, so it's a storage place of knowledge. And when we were looking at the slides of all the different libraries around the country, and when we were having a kōrero before we came tonight, we were talking about, the importance of marae and what that contains. And I think they, like they spoke about a wakahuia, but for us, all our stories are held in our tuku panels and our whakairo. So, and a lot of that's about mātauranga and learning and our knowledge. And so I guess whare mātauranga, whare puka, yeah.
And in fact, that's what Tūranga does really well, with all the panels on all its floors.
Kara?
Yeah, I guess, libraries are, the different spaces, and I guess the difference was back in, as you said, there wasn't the internet back in the day, so knowledge was stored in storehouses, I guess, in single places. Now knowledge is, on my phone, I can pretty much find anything that I like. So I guess it's about how do we create spaces where we can share stories, and where we can share experiences, and where we can be expressive in who we are, and sort of reconnect with the past and sort of think about the future. One of the things that I'm keenly interested in is how do we redesign these spaces to reflect who we are now and sort of future focused as well, but also how do we integrate other things which are incredibly important, such as sustainability. So how do we not only design things to sort of look like water, or to have that reflection and representation of water, but how do we actually honour water and actually utilise it in a proper way? How do we create buildings to ensure that we've got green roofs, that we've got solar panels, that we're recycling all those components as a part of the living element of the building, not just a really nice thing to sort of give expression to. So and I guess from a Māori perspective, that's something that we're quite being a part of an ecosystem, being a part of the balance and the harmony in a real sense. So I think that's a component that people need to consider is how do we actually create buildings that are living as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to ask a question. So that there's various different arguments to say that there's a lot about the library that has changed, and I know that the library, Wellington City Council, were in the midst of doing a change proposal, shall we call it, which they were going to spend a large amount of money. Did I hear the word 25 million?
That was proposed.
Yeah, so they were going to spend about 25 million doing work to the library. So that's now been forced upon them, so they may have to do different work to the library, and it has been suggested that it could be dealt away with altogether by the Mayor, who now doesn't seem to be saying that quite so much. The talk at the museum, the National Library, a few weeks ago, where Adam Thornton, the engineer, said that, look, this is actually a solvable problem. But so I think that the key thing is that there's likely to be some changes, and so I just want to ask Ken, if he could maybe reply. How do you, obviously that you feel very strongly about this building as one of your creations, how do you feel about it having a new life in a different direction?
Well, I was just a helper.
You were just a helper, but you're a big part of it.
And that was a great privilege working with a great architect, I guess. But and it's always a great privilege working on a public building, which is for our people. I mean, it's all okay to design nice, beautiful houses for individuals, but our role as architects is really to work with as many people as possible. But coming back to that building, I don't feel particularly precious about it. I think we also need to think about disconnecting the function, the operations of what a library is and does from the actual architecture, from the building itself. That building could be anything. It's just a frame. We designed it as a very flexible building that could accommodate any range of things. And I said at the last talk, I said, when I was working on that project 30 years ago, and we were looking at moving the old library into this new building, and the old library was becoming an art gallery. And I thought, gee, in 50 years' time, this new library might end up becoming an art gallery. So there's all sorts of things you can do with the building. We don't know what a library is going to be in 50 years' time, but what we do know is that people want to come together and commune together and to talk and to listen and to read and hug and look at other people. And the great success with that building that kind of surprised us all really was how popular it is for people as a place to go. The coffee shop helped, the changing room first changing room in a public building in New Zealand, for parenting room. All of these things were different, but it was generous. It was generous to the public. There were places for people, homeless people, to sit and spend the day, in somewhere warm. And there were places for teenagers to go and read, and so it did lots of things that were really positive. And so, you could tear out everything that's in there, get rid of all the bookcases, and create a new sort of library, or whatever that might be. But as a building, it's a strong piece of architecture that relates to a concept for a civic square, as a communal space. I mean, that square, one of the intentions of that civic square was to be a place for 10,000 people to protest. That was one of the briefs. So, not just to gather, but also to stand and protest. So, there are lots of opportunities. What we created is a framework within which to interpret our current world.
And I think it's important also you can keep the outside, one option is keeping the outside of the building, but the inside, we'd already done designs for that, for example, to completely redo the internal part and the different interplays required. It could be robotics or whatever that we're going to be used in different ways for doing things. There are issues with the building. I mean, there are earthquake issues which take an awful lot of money, not just the floors. The outside of the building, all the marble panels have to be pinned, and the main escalator and stairs have to be separated after Christchurch. Yeah, that's always been known, but it's never been able to be.
Yeah.
But all these things are quite easy to do.
Okay. I want to open the floor up to the public, to you guys now, and start off with Helen Ritchie.
Yeah, thank you. Fantastic evening, fantastic displays and so on and talks. I just want to ask, we can have exhibitions, we can have fantastic buildings and so on and so on. Do you think that the library should remain closed for a long time, whether it's, there's talk of demolished, talk of all sorts of things, what might happen with it, but I think the public's concern at the moment is that there's no central space. It's the space, and the communal space, and the public space, and the books, and all that goes on. So what do we do about that? Do we try and have it opened fairly soon, fixed, or do we have a long, protracted period when the capital city of New Zealand and people don't have the space anymore? And I think they feel a great loss at the moment. There's no question about that. So what's your views?
I mean, the civic square is dead now.
Yes.
Because not only is it the library, it's the council buildings being vacated as well at the same time. I mean, I think they would need to be looking at other options for providing that for people. I mean, the library itself has its pop-up libraries going throughout the city, which will be moving through. And they themselves are very popular, and the branch libraries, but the central space is gone, and that's what a lot of people have said to me. I want that space where I could sit, or I could finish my business, or work there, or design, or just be. It's not there anymore.
Yeah, Adam Thornton at the last at the public talk at the National Library seemed to think that there was a quick solution for temporarily strengthening it as a stage one. So what the council could actually do is prop it up for now and still think about it. You know, get the building up and going and still think about its future rather than just it sitting there with cordoned off, you know, if there is a quicker way of fixing it structurally and let it last for a few more years, even if different decisions are made about its future. I think it's a shame to just leave it like it is.
Sometimes when patch jobs are done, it can often be an opportunity loss in what could potentially be. I guess when buildings are left, you know, to languish a little bit, they lose a lot of their heart, or what we will say is the modi of the building.
Yeah.
And inside there is a lot of books.
Yeah.
That I guess there's a lot of taonga to a lot of people. And a lot of historical information and forward-thinking information as well. But the building as well represents a period of time, and when I look at some of the examples that are shown, I see that it reflects the people of the communities that they were built for in some of those international cities, and I think we need to start thinking from I guess our sense of being is, do we see ourselves reflected in what was? And is there some opportunities there that now could be explored and have a representation and carry a story that reflects all of us in a certain way, and particularly from a tangata whenua point of view. We've supported a lot of the things in the city. I think the whenua is a beautiful example, and so is Te Papa, of trying to inject some of that into our landscape. And when opportunities arise, sometimes we should look at that as an opportunity of what can be and what could be when these things happen. Yeah, and perhaps that's what happened in Christchurch. You know, like something catastrophic happened to them, and they're looking at the rebuild as opportunities of how they can have reflections of their communities and what they get to rebuild. Yeah, got it.
But any other people out there?
Everyone's hungry.
Everyone's hungry. I'd like to ask Judy Keith Brown just to come up and to, yeah, if you can please. Because I haven't got a copy of what it is that she's going to talk about, so I think it's best that she talk about what she knows she's talking about. What's been interesting here at the school, we've had our library, which has been up at the front of the school for the last year or so, and within the last 3 months, they've actually taken out all the books from the front of the library, which really irritated the hell out of me, because I like to go to a library to read books, and especially to read the latest books, which have all been now tucked away around the back so nobody finds them. But conversely, the library has now become very much more popular by students who mainly sit there to do some work and sometimes to read Facebook, the book of face, as the Italians call it. So I'm not sure, it's become more of a people place, but it's less of, and it's an information gathering place perhaps, it's a place where stories are told, but to me it's really, it loses a lot by its change in function. And it's like all the books around the back just sort of on the stacks doing very little. So I'm really intrigued, and I think that's one of the things we want from you as people who are interested in this is to look for imagine new journeys that the current building, I'm not even going to call it a library anymore, I think. So the current building, the Wakahuia, the place where we're storing our knowledge, how can we make it more about storing knowledge and less just about the book, and how can we weave those stories into it? And so I'll invite Judy Keith Brown up here to give the last talk of the night and to tell you.
Okay, I didn't know I had to do this, so I'm going to have to make it up as I go along. I've got a lot of stories to tell about the library, having brought up 2 sons pretty much in that library, and as a very lonely young mother, going to the library pretty much every day probably stopped me from going completely bonkers. Now, we're very lucky in Wellington with the Institute of Architects. We've got a fantastic group of graduates who have put together an idea for a competition for the Wellington Central Library. So one of the purposes of tonight is to launch the Wellington Central Library Design Competition. Registration opens today, and there's going to be an exhibition at the end of it. The submission deadline is the 9th of September, so you've got a whole month to get your ideas together. It's open to everybody, so we've given it already to a couple of schools, but we expect all of you to enter. You don't have to do drawings, you can do whatever you want. And all the competition details are on our website, on the NZIA website. The exhibition will open and the winners will be announced on the 20th of September. And we've nearly got an exhibition space organised. The judges are Stuart Gardine, Robin Simpson and Gregory O'Brien. So you're all welcome to enter, and what we want to know is what is your story for the future of Wellington Central Library. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Judy, and I think that probably wraps it up for us tonight. So thank you all for your patience, thank you for your interest. Let's go and have some kai somewhere, because my tummy is very much rumbling. We've only had 2 carrot sticks. So on that, good night, and we'll see you tomorrow. Register.